Okay, welcome to another lecture in the series. This time we're going to talk a little bit about tool maintenance. In particular, we're going to concentrate on the need to ensure that stamps and pritchels are maintained correctly for safety reasons for the horse and for the avoidance of premature shoe loss. And we'll discuss a little bit on an approach on how to ensure that they match up to the nails that you're going to use. It's only a brief lecture, but it will be followed up by a practical movie demonstration. But I hope that you get something out of it, and there's something for you to refer back to look at in terms of how the stamp and the pritchel should match each other in relationship to the nail that you're using. Here we use E-head nails, but the same principles apply irrespective of where you are. So without further ado, we'll move on. And the most important thing to say is, why do we need to make sure that we maintain our tools? Well, it's difficult to make good shoes effectively and efficiently when your tongues don't fit, your hammer's not in decent order with a decent shaft, and above all, when the stamp and your pritchels are bludgeoned to death and they don't correspond to each other, it's difficult to get them to shear through a nail hole properly and for that nail to fit inside of that hole without the risk of tearing or shearing. To get the best out of the stamp and pritchel, they need to work together, and so as a consequence of that, you need to maintain them together in a way that where they match up as a pair, as a working pair. So let's talk about the stamp. We've got several types. The plain stamp for obviously for plain stamp shoes and some heavier gauge fullers. A concave or a thinner stamp to fit in a fuller groove, and occasionally you'll see people using a handheld stamp which looks similar to a pritchel, but instead of having a drawn out taper, a long thin drawn out taper, it's got a short taper that corresponds to the head of a nail. A good stamp should be resistant to shock, have the ability to punch hot metal, be able to be hot forged, be air or water cooled, and be able to be heat treated in a forge environment and resilient against abrasion. Incorrectly made tools, if your stamp and pritchel are not dressed correctly, a myriad of problems occur. The nail holes can be too small, they can be twisted as you punch them and try to clear them through with your pritchel. If the nail holes are too big, they cross the section. When that happens, you're likely to lose shoes because of risen clenches and sheared nails. And the risk of injury to the horse through a nail prick or bind is increased because the nail holes are too sloppy, and so you can't control the direction of the nail as it's being driven in. Sorry about that. Just kill the phone. To ensure that you get the maximum performance from your stamp, the tip of the stamp needs to be forged to correspond to the shape of the head of the nail in use, and the body of the stamp corresponds accordingly. However, the body of a concave stamp will need to be forged so that it fits inside of the fullering without deforming it. So, whilst the whole of a plain stamp can follow the head of the nail, with a fullered shoe and a concave shoe, it relies on the groove to support the head on two sides. So your stamp can be slightly thinner on those sides, but it needs to correspond to the angles of the two other sides of the nail head so that the shaft fits in clearly. Okay, here we use the head of a nail cut off just where the shank joins it, and this part of the stamp should correspond in shape and form almost exactly to this part of the head of the nail. So cut the head of a nail size E5 or E6 where it needs to meet the shank. The section is revealed in that size, and the punching face needs to correspond to it for a correct fit. Here's how we cut the nail. Here's the shaft that will correspond with the pritchel, and this part, the head, corresponds with the stamp. Looking down over the top of it, here's the punch end of the stamp, which corresponds to the head of the nail where it's been broken off from the shaft here. Heat the stamp to a forging heat, usually an orange, and forge the tip of the stamp to meet the corresponding size of the nail head, which is shown in the previous slide. Make sure that the whole stamp is heated to avoid stress fractures across the metal. When the desired shape has been achieved, reheat the stamp to a cherry red and allow it to cool in the air but away from a draft. That will normalize the material and relieve any of the stresses within the material caused by the forging earlier. Dressing the pritchel, working in conjunction with the stamp and the pritchel and the punch, working in conjunction with the stamp, the pritchel punch face. This should correspond to the section of the neck of the nail and the punching face of the stamp. So the end of our pritchel here should be drawn down to correspond to the top of the shaft of the nail, which corresponds to the end of the stamp. That way, when the pritchel is driven in to clear the stamp hole, it will follow through in the same shape or form as the shaft of the nail, leaving a tight, uniform fit around the neck. Again, take a red heat and taper the pritchel down to the punching face, and that can be either dovetailed or rectangular. So drawn down, okay, so it forms a rectangular shape. And then often you see people just jump back on the edge, which is what we call dovetailing. And the dovetail allows for a clearer blowout of the section at the bottom of the nail head and a clear exit hole. But the shaft here, okay, just above the dovetail, should still correspond to the shaft of the nail as shown on the previous slide. Through pritchel is used to clear the nail holes of any burrs. It can and should correspond to the shaft of the nail and needs to be forged accordingly. To normalize the pritchel and release stresses in the metal created by the hot forging, heat the pritchel to a cherry red and allow it to cool in the air away from the draft, similar to that process used with the stamp. The characteristics of the pritchel are similar to that of the stamp and means that they can be made out of the same material. The type of metal that meets these characteristics demands materials like H13 or S1 or S7 tool steels, and they're available from most foundry suppliers. To avoid bludgeoning the end of the shaft, take the end of the stamp, make sure that the metal is red before stamping the hole, and only strike the tool twice, cooling it out with saddle soap or a similar medium between nail holes. Beating the stamp 3 or 4 times and allowing it to conduct too much heat will turn it into a malleable state and cause it to mushroom, as in this example shown here on the right. So ensure that once you've decided where the nail hole is going, sharp, precise blows, cool the stamp out, open up your hole again, and carry on. Pritchel should only need to be struck once to knock the nail through, and if you're having to strike the pritchel 3 or 4 times, it's an indication the nail hole has not been stamped deep enough and the section of the plug inside the nail hole is too thick. In this instance, when you have finally driven the pritchel through the hole, it will be misshapen and oversized. So make sure when you're using the stamp, you can feel it almost bottom to the edge of your material, so you're only leaving a small slug to clear out when the material's a little bit colder, when the shoe material's a bit colder, so that the pritchel shears it out through the back of the exit hole. Well, I hope that helps, and as I said before, it will be accompanied by a short tool maintenance video, which will be posted on this module. And good luck with your shoemaking skills. Thank you.